We had a little bit of a hiatus. I had a bit of a facial injury. For those of watching it on video, you'll see I've got a little bit of a black eye underneath. A couple of weeks ago, it was a lot worse than this. So apologies for having a period of time where there was nothing going out. But I'm really delighted to come back with a bang. So I've come back with a very good friend of mine, Brett Tabke, who's the founder and CEO of Pubcon. And we've known each other for probably, 25 years, Brett? I guess it must be.
Yep. Going on 25. Met at Pubcon in London. I think about 24. It would have been
Yeah.
2001.
Yeah. So it's funny. I was on LinkedIn the other day and I saw somebody post, I think James Kean, who used to work for eSpotting. He posted a picture of the City of York pub and he was saying he was there. And I'm like, yeah, I was there. I remember throwing a couple of £100 behind the bar and sponsoring some drinks. I think you were stood up on the piano at one point in time, giving out prizes, I believe.
Yeah.
So those were the early days of in-person events, and Pubcon has been a life-changing event to go to speak at, to network at. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the origin story of how did you get to where you ended up starting Pubcon? So maybe go back pre-Pubcon to arriving at Pubcon.
Sure. I started a little site called Search Engine World. It was a newsletter on my ISP in I don't know whether it was 96 or 97. I think it was 97. And I was supporting clients with information about search engines. Everybody loved it so much they wanted to talk about it. So I started a forum underneath Search Engine World, finally moved it to its own domain. Then I moved the forum to its own domain called Webmaster World. And on Webmaster World, boy, we got a lot of traffic in those days. Man, I look back and I shake my head at how much traffic we used to get there. At the peak in about 2009, we were doing 150,000 referrals a day from Google. 150. I can't dream of getting that today, pulling that much out of a search engine. So that's where we started. Then a bunch of people wanted to get together and talk about all of this because it was the early days. 1999, 2000, people wanted to talk Google and what's going on with Google. And we had to share information because we couldn't do it out there in public. Pretty hard to talk about gaming search engines in front of the search engines. Group of guys, early moderators on Webmaster World wanted to get together. And I said, fine, organize it and do it. And I couldn't go to the first one, but the first one was about 50 people sitting around the City of York pub in London. And they said it was a conference. And I said, no, it's a pub conference. And the name stuck. So that was the early start. And from there, it was 2 years later, we finally actually got together in a hotel and had sessions where we had speakers, and we each had Matt Cutts from Google was the first search engine speaker we had.
And since then, you've had how many Pubcons have there been?
Been about 2 every year since 2001. So whatever that adds up to, and then a bunch of small events, get-togethers and day conferences. So it's got to be, I don't know, somewhere around 45 events.
So in terms of the evolution of in-person events, I think, again, I've worked with, obviously, I've spoken at Pubcon in the past. I've worked with clients who ran their own events. And so I've had the opportunity to be on the back end to see what goes on behind the scenes. And I've always maintained that anyone that runs an in-person event must be absolutely out their mind, right? So what made you decide, apart from the fact that a couple of moderators just said, hey, we should do an in-person event, was that literally the kind of the driving force behind wanting to do in-person events?
Basically, yeah. It actually goes back further than that. In the 80s, I did some of these weekend trainings, personal growth trainings. It was called EST and LifeSpring and a couple. And I always marveled about how these trainings were put on, how they did all the music and the chairs, and they had chart packs, and they had all of this material stuff that they had to put together. One week, I got the opportunity to do the setup on one of these trainings. And the owner of this particular training said, you do a better job for free than the guy I'm paying to do it. Why don't you come to work for me? And I almost went to work for him because I enjoyed it so much. So I had a little bit of a background and exposure to this. And when I saw what was happening with Pubcon, I knew I wanted to make it bigger. But at the time, I was so distracted running Webmaster World and at the time Search Engine World that I didn't think it was a real possibility of growing it. So we were going to do it as volunteers, everybody get together and all the moderators will help. We'll pitch in, we'll all go out, team effort. And it came down to doing it. And I was the only one doing any of the work. Nobody showed up. One gal showed up. One woman from Alaska, good old Mevox, Teresa Nizik showed up, helped out with registration at the pub, helped me get some of the back end stuff together. nobody else wanted to do anything. I said, if nobody's going to do anything, I guess it's on
Yeah.
me. And I just saw the potential there when I had all of these exhibitors showing up wanting to throw money. You want to get together in a bar and you're going to give us how much money to set at a table with your little sign? We could do
Yeah.
this. So once I took to it, I just, okay, this is going to be awesome. But like you say, you got to be crazy because the stress levels just, if one thing goes wrong, it all goes wrong.
So
It's just,
again, I think when you look at it, like a lot of the events that take place, I'll put search in inverted commas, right? So the search conferences that kind of exist today, right? A lot of them are, I think there's a lot of conferences where they have huge numbers of people, right? And the huge numbers of people are really there to almost hang out in the bars and just do meetings, right? And the content of the speakers is pretty poor, right? So typically it's an exhibit hall where everyone kind of congregates. So that might be where the 5, 6, 7,000 people go, right? And people go, well, you get 7,000 people there. But the reality of it is that may be good for the exhibit hall, people on the exhibit floor, right? But for the speakers themselves, one, there's not that many people in the sessions. And two, the quality is not very good because a lot of the sessions are old tons
it-
to somebody taking a bigger booth at the exhibit hall, right? Type of thing. So you end up in this situation where the person that's on stage is actually pitching rather than educating.
yeah,
Right. And for me,
yeah,
Pubcon has never been that, right? It's never ever been a sort of a
right,
pitch fest, right?
right.
And I'm pretty sure, I don't know if there's like a written rule or unwritten rule, but there must be somewhere where it says, if you stand on stage and pitch, you'll never come to Pub. Right?
Yeah. We've weeded a few out, but no, we just tell people, hey, mention your product once at the start and once at the end. Tell them who you are, and then we want people to show their expertise. That's their calling card. That's their pitch is their expertise on
Yeah, and it's
stage.
funny if you look at like so many of the speakers I've had on before this particular episode, like so many of them, I can trace my origins of meeting them back to being at a Pubcon, right? I always remember I always take I always take the rise out of Dave Roth because I always say when I first met him, I was unsure about whether I liked him because he was so corporate, right? Because at the time he was working for Yahoo, right? So he would always be in the speaker's room with his shirt and tie. He'd always be on conference calls. And I'm like,
Right.
this is not cool. Right? For me, I think the whole thing I've loved about the search industry is it's been very laid back, very kind of blasé and everything. And again, I think some of the early pub cons, there was definitely panels where people were sat on stage presenting with bottles of beer or what have you, cocktails, right? And I know it's different now, but I think back then it was probably appropriate. Um,
Yeah.
so in terms of all the sort of pub cons that you've had some phenomenal kind of keynote speakers on the stage, right? Who would you say, if you had to go, my top 2 or 3 people, who would you say the top 2 or 3 people that you managed to persuade to come and speak at PubCon? Who would they be?
My favorite has got to be Guy Kawasaki. He was number 4 at Apple in charge of PR for him for the Mac. He launched the Mac. He's just a good guy, always brings good info. I still follow him to this day. And in fact, I talked to him, tried to get him out to Vegas, but he wasn't available that week. The other one, we've had a couple of big ones. We had Satya Nadella from Microsoft before he became CEO of Microsoft. And Tony Hsieh, rest
Yeah.
in peace, when he was CEO of Zappos. And then the big author, Malcolm Gladwell of Tipping Point. We had him in Boston. So we had some good speakers, that's for sure. And of course, nobody can forget Mr. Matt
Yeah.
Cutts. So he's a one-man show. Gosh, he was always so good for Google.
So it always used to make me laugh. I would always sort of party hard when we were in Vegas. You'd be in the sort of convention center, the kind of morning sessions. I didn't see that many morning keynotes because they were on early. That wasn't early wasn't really my vibe back in the day. But I always made the effort to make sure that I was in the room when Matt Cutts was presenting because
Oh, yeah.
again, he was
Yeah.
a very good presenter, presented great content. But it always made me laugh when at the end he'd finish his presentation and go off to the side and there'd be this queue of people that would want to meet him and have their photo taken and want to ask him questions. He wasn't very gracious with his time, but it always amazed me how many people would talk to him about their sort of network of sites that they had and link building sites. And all of a sudden the following day, they're all gone. And I'm thinking, there was your first mistake, right?
Sure.
I'm sure he must have some
Yep.
sort of microphones sending back voice to Google HQ to the web spam team. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one.
Yeah, he always loved showing up at the hotel bar at least after happy hour, so everybody had 2 or 3 drinks in 'em. 'Cause he got all kinds of information at the
Yeah.
bar, so Matt never drank, so
But obviously, as an industry, we've had some great characters. We've lost a lot of friends along the way. I don't know if it's just me looking at it in a sort of, now I'm into my 60s, looking at it in a more sort of fatalist way, but there seems to be, like, in the search community, we seem to have proportionately had more people in the search community who are no longer with us through either natural kind of causes of their death or their own taking their own lives than in other industries. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts around why that might be.
you look back and I think there's 7 people that have committed suicide in SEO, extended SEO over the last decade. I don't know anybody else in any other part of my life ever that has committed suicide. It j I'd never heard of it before that, and it really bothered me for quite a while, what we could do at Pubcon to try and address this. Could we get involved somehow? And I just think when you look back at these people that are now gone, all of them were very successful. Huge numbers of traffic. There was a couple, one guy, he was into some shady sites, but he had huge numbers of visitors back in the day. And then he went almost broke. And it was at that point he took his own life. Every person I look at, almost the same story. They were hugely successful. The more you look at it, the more I realized that all of these small guys, they got hit hard 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12 in there, got hit hard by Google updates, very hard, lost all their traffic. I know I was on Webmaster World. We were doing huge numbers of visitors back in 2010 even, and then Panda hit, and we went from 150,000 referrals a day to 15,000 to 1,500 a day. It just killed the
And
site, just absolutely killed the site. And when I think about these people who have passed, I think it had a lot to do with it. I think Google sucked all the money out of the ecosystem. They sent all the traffic to these big brand sites now because they want they want trust, they want authority, they want to cover their back. So they send it all to these big brands now. So I really believe there was a huge depression that went over our industry for about the last decade over loss of traffic and the changes to the web. And now going forward with the new search paradigm with AI and the loss of referrals, I don't know what's going to
yeah,
happen, Jim. I really don't know what's going to happen in the next
yeah, I
10
definitely
years.
think it's a pivotal point in time for people in terms of their decision about what to do for the future of their career. Certainly here in the
Mm,
UK, I know a lot of agency owners are struggling with all sorts of different things, whether it's like clients, staff. There's so many things that are up in the air. There's still a lot of businesses hugely successful, making tons of money, right? But I don't think necessarily that just making tons of money is the way you're going to be measured in terms of your performance, right? Again, one of the keynotes at the most recent PubCon was Will Reynolds, right? And Will has always had a
mhm.
very refreshing outlook on. He's grown a very successful business, but he's grown a very successful business, and he's also had a very refreshing outlook in terms of how he rewards his staff. About
Mhm.
he does it every year because it's important to it. So
Right. Yep. There's a lot of ways you can give back. We've had the charity foundation since it was 2006. We were down in New Orleans 6 weeks before Hurricane Katrina hit down there, the massive flood. And that's when we started the annual charity giving. We need to get back to that. We didn't do it this last time, but we're going to get back to doing that to try and give back to the community in different ways.
So obviously the pandemic, I think, changed a lot of the way in which people gathered their information, right? So I think a lot of people switched from in-person events to online stuff, right? And
Mhm.
again, I know that we've spoken privately about the impact that the pandemic had on PubCon. It was brutal, I'm guessing.
Yeah, 4 years without any income. We tried the virtual stuff, and I've talked to so many guys who did virtual conferences. We all got the same story. Ton of work for a tenth of the income, doesn't even cover expenses. It was a lot of work. Yeah, everybody just drained their reserves, tapped into their retirement fund to make it through it. I read on one of the meeting association boards that 70% of the conferences under 500 people are no longer around post-pandemic. They're just gone. 70%. And when you look in the M&A right now, mergers and acquisition in the conference and trade show space, there's a lot of activity going on right now because guys are jumping out of it quick.
Yeah.
Now that they come back and build it up a little bit, they're getting out of it. Get offers every day, almost inquiries every day about conferences. So clearly, major change in the entire sector segment.
So what do you think it is that makes a kind of successful conference a successful conference?
Number one, people enjoy it. That's the first thing. If I had so many people come up to me in Vegas and say this was the best event they'd ever been to because it's the one we have right now. It's the one we just were at. Chris Jones came up and said, what a gift this was to the mental health of our industry. And he's absolutely right. And when people come to me and tell me stuff like that, which I've heard over and over again, it was a successful event. Ingredients got to be community. That's why we were successful in the first place. We had the Webmaster World community to tap into. And once you have that in-person thing, people get a taste of that. They want to know who these friends are that they've been talking to for years online are. And then social media really also changed how conferences interact and work, because now we got to do all this social media stuff. And we got to try and reach different audiences, because the LinkedIn audience is completely different from the Facebook audience to the Twitter audience to elsewhere out there. Even the Reddit audience is completely
Yeah.
different. And I try and address each one of these differently to be successful. So it's completely changed from when we started in the pub. That's for sure. Getting together in a hotel.
In terms of, I know for me, Pubcon was really going to Vegas. It was always for me one of the highlights for me to go there. It was a much bigger event than the one most recently. I think one of the challenges for event organizers is because everyone had this sort of like their slot, right? When you look at, it seems like this Q4 seems to be when all of the search conferences take place. They seem to be one after the other. And I'm thinking, why is it all congregated around such a small amount of space? Again, I'm quite particular about which events I'll go to as an attendee, which ones I'll go to speak at. And I know that there's a lot of people who will quite happily go and speak everywhere about everything. And again, I think one of the challenges is that they're probably not being honest with themselves. They should probably stop, take a kind of stock and go, is this really actually adding value to anything other than maybe my waistline and my personal brand? It's not necessarily going to help financially the business that I'm working for. And I just wondered, again, what the sort of process for, again, if you're running an event, what's the process for getting people to come and speak? You say, I only want people that will speak at my show and not others. Do you have a kind of like this criteria for kind of whether people will be accepted or not accepted?
Right. We don't do any of that game playing stuff of you speak here, not speak there. We had a couple of speakers that I've seen them speak at least at 5 different events in the last 3 weeks, including ours. They're fantastic. Different audience, different approach, different. When I'm in an audience and Jim Banks is in the audience, I'm going to give an entirely different presentation than just Joe User off the street. So no, we don't play any of those speaker games. We look for expertise, and we want to try and see a deck before we approve a speaker or a video or even a TikTok. I even watched TikToks this last time. So they need to have some kind of game before they get there. So that's where we start. Show me your expertise and we'll talk. So
yeah, because I think the days of a certain speaker putting bums on seats and everything is probably gone, right? I think a lot of people talk about him. Again, he's a great speaker, Gary Vaynerchuk, right? But everyone's got a picture with Gary Vaynerchuk. Everyone's got a picture with Gary because again, I know his ultimate goal is to buy the New York Jets, right? And it seems that's his kind of reason for speaking at conferences is to keep putting money into the coffers to enable him to buy the jets. But I think sometimes yes, his delivery style is great, but when you've seen him present once or twice, you don't need to see him present more, because he may talk about something different, but it's still the same delivery and probably the same sort of theme that he's just regurgitating for a different platform. So he's always been an early adopter of a new platform, and then he turns his back on it and walks away and goes off and does something else.
Yep. That's why I was so sad this time not to have a Googler out from Google. I had Fabrice from Microsoft Bang out, but you need somebody that brings fresh info that your audience is definitely interested in. That'll put bums in seats, as we say. But whereas Gary is entertaining, he's so energetic with his delivery. But like you say, he doesn't necessarily bring something new every time he
Yeah.
speaks. It's Gary. You're going to get Gary on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever week it is, whatever month or year it is. You get it. Whereas the search engines, they bring fresh info about updates, about crawl stats,
Yeah, I always used to
all
love
kinds of
the
stuff.
again, I've been a paid search guy forever, right? But I used to love at Pubcon, you had the sessions, the Meet the Crawlers, where you'd have an individual from Microsoft, Bing, or Google, or Tioma, I think back in the day. And you had all the different people on stage talking about the way they've handled certain sort of things. And for me, it was really handy to have everyone on stage at the same time talking about what.
Yep. Yeah, our first big conference there in Boston that had actual sessions was Matt Cutts from Google, Tim Mayer from All the Web, or was he Meyer? Was he from Inktomi at
Yeah.
the time? He might, no, I think he was All the
Okay.
Web. And who was it? Paul Gardee from Teoma, Ask Jeeves, and then somebody from Yahoo, Dan
Yeah.
Boberg from, and those four guys went at it for 2.5 hours, and everybody just loved it, hearing from everybody. We couldn't do that even 10 years ago. There just wasn't enough search engines out there to be all Google all the
But
time.
why do you think
So
Google have done that? Why do you think they don't send anyone to an event like Pubcon? Because you would have thought, again, they've tried to be a lot more helpful now with some of the information that they make available. But is it just that they're too big for their own boots and they just want to do everything themselves?
the last year Matt Cutts spoke for us, I believe it was 2015. Uh, just before he spoke, the day before he spoke, we had Jason Calacanis speak, and he went after Matt for
He's good at
because
that. He's good at going after people.
yeah, he went right at Matt and basically called Matt a bunch of names, and I think it upset Google a bit. I've heard since then, and it was 6 months later, Matt was gone at Google. I think their PR, when the PR department changed at Google, they decided they didn't need to put themselves out there like that anymore. They didn't need to take the risks, and they only want to communicate when they can communicate on their platform or control the platform, such as Twitter or one of the social networks where they can
I
interact.
also think,
So I think they just changed their opinion of PR.
yeah,
They don't have
because I
to.
know on the paid side of things, they've got Ginny Marvin, who does a great job on the sort of paid side of things, right? But they don't seem to have anyone. I know that they had Gary Illish. I don't know if I haven't seen or heard from Gary in, I don't even know how long, right? He seemed to be like very prominent, and then all of a sudden he just vanished, right? Certainly he vanished from my radar.
Yeah, he came down to Austin in March of last year when we had our first return conference, and he did a great job. And then they laid all these people off, cut all the budgets, and nobody's got budget anymore to do any travels.
Yeah, because I think
So
I was helping a friend who was running an event. I was trying to get somebody from Google along, and they were like, "You've got to pay for my hotel. You've got to pay for my flight. You've got to pay for this. You've got to pay for that." Right. And they couldn't tell me who the person was going to be until the day before. And I'm like, that's not going to work because, again, they were not going to come along and talk candidly. It was very much going to be a sort of canned presentation, very
they,
Googlified. And that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted somebody to kind of be much more open
yeah,
and everything else. And I just said, okay, let's just not bother.
these big these big companies, they don't have to. They've got their own platform. They've got their own outlets. They can control their own message. The only thing coming in person was Matt would come and get information himself to upgrade the quality of the service. So he was doing recon research coming to PubCon.
Yeah.
So, and it helped make his job a little easier talking to webmasters, getting everybody on the good side of Google.
So in terms of again, I had the opportunity to spend some time with Brett in Australia, a friend's conference down there. And again, it was an opportunity to remind me of just how good a presenter you are. And I know that a lot of the presentations that you're doing more recently have been on the topic of AI. Kind of, what was it
Mhm.
that kind of got you excited about AI?
Severe boredom to death with Google. You know? And this is what's next. Obviously, AI is what's next. You can see it's going to take over and get baked into absolutely everything. And we're seeing that live out. Our first search conference back was in last of February, 1st of March last year in 2023, just after ChatGTP had launched in November of 22. So it's obvious where it's headed. And now we've got search GTPs. I knew I could see the writing on the wall, what was gonna happen. They were gonna bake it into search. They're gonna bake it into everything from our phones to our now they're touting AI watches. What do we need an AI watch for? So, you knew it was coming. It's what's next. It was gonna take a little time to shake out. That's why I jumped in early because early movers always
Yeah.
win. So, yeah, we just jumped all in on AI, and I've been continuing to stay all in on AI, and now just this last week, OpenAI launched search the web within ChatGPT. So now Search GPT is
Yeah.
in there. It's what's next. And I'm down with Search GTP. Have you
I
tried it yet?
haven't, no. It's one of the things again, I've drifted in and out of paying for a premium subscription to it and not, right?
Mhm.
So it's one of those things. I think the thing I like about
Right.
it is you can pick it up and put it down, right? So I think it's on my list of things that I want to resurrect. But right at the moment, I've got some other stuff that I'm working on
Right.
that's outside of the search side of things. Obviously, the podcast is a big part of that. Again, trying to focus on the AI side of the podcast production and output for, you mentioned there about social media, getting the social content out there is, again, I want to try and make it as cost effective as possible. That doesn't mean cheap. I just want it to be cost effective, right? Because again, I think a lot of
Right.
people don't realize just how expensive. I didn't when I set one up. I didn't realize how expensive running a podcast was, right? Because there's so many things you need in the back end that you really don't realize you need until you need them, right? And then you're like, you need a
Right.
website, you need this. Okay, so all of a sudden I'm into a couple of $100 worth of subscriptions for things that,
Oh, I know it.
so,
Yep.
and
Yep.
again, I'm trying to go, well, do I really need that? So again, I went through a phase a little while back drawing up a list of all the things I pay on a monthly basis, right? Get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. And one of the things I got rid of quite recently was Zoom, right? I had a paid Zoom account for probably since Zoom started. And I just thought, I'm
Yeah.
just not using Zoom now. I had a client that used to do
Right.
a regular Zoom, but I think Google Meet's more than good enough now. Microsoft Teams is more than
Mhm.
good enough now, right? There's so many other platforms that you can use to provide the
Right.
speed. So
Yeah.
I think in some respects, that's
Yep.
probably one of the things. I think all of the AI facilities that Zoom came out with, like, really put me off it. I'm like, this is just way so much stuff that I just don't want, that they just kept throwing in there. I don't want that, don't want that. They just seem to be not listening to what I wanted and give me the ability to create what I
Right.
wanted, right?
They really took it. Everybody going back to work in the offices, they had a pretty big downturn post
Yeah,
pandemic. So I can understand why they're throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
yeah. Okay, so obviously AI, you think it's got a big future. I'm inclined to agree
Oh,
with you. I just don't really know what that future looks like from me, and certainly on the
right.
pay side of things. I think like the whole thing with there's this whole argument about match types and phrase matches going away on Google Ads. Right, you're not getting data anymore. Right, you don't get keyword data anywhere near as much as you used to. And I know that there's so many people go, hang on a minute, I'm paying this money for these advertisers. I should get it's my data. I should get my data. And when I agree to that to an extent, but I think so much of it now is it's multi-device, multi-touch point, right? There's so many different touch points that kind of go on in there. I'm not really sure. I still haven't wrapped my head around how the AI side of things is going to impact the advertising ecosystem, right? Because again, so at the moment, the search GPT is only available for those that pay the premium subscription, right? But I'm thinking at some point in time, they're going to have to make that more readily available, because they're not going to go, unless you pay $20, you're not going to get access to it at all, right? Because I think they're going to miss out. So will they be, right? Well, in that case, we're going to go down the route of charging people by showing them ads in amongst the kind of the results that are there, right? So I don't know. I don't know how it's going to all shake out really.
I think they will maybe eventually make it a paid version, a free version, but now it's paid. They're getting it perfected, gives them time to get it perfected, get feedback from users. And really, this first batch here, it's not about trying to kill Google or compete with Google. They're just trying to shut the back door because so much of the traffic that is on ChatGTP exits and goes to Google. All the charts we see are that's the number one hop off point for ChatGTP. People go to Google. We don't know why. I know OpenAI knows why, whether it's to do a search that wasn't fulfilled on ChatGTP or just the normal course of business. That many people go to Google in a day and they naturally go to OpenAI and then go to Google. But they need to be able to shut that door a little bit. And having their own search engine does shut that
Yeah.
door, at least for the people who are going to Google to search, which you got to figure a good percentage of them are. So that's step one. Close the back door, stop leaking all that traffic to Google, keep it on site, and then they'll go from there and figure out what they can do with it. The biggest problem with Search GTP is it's serviced by Bing, using the Bing
Yeah.
index, not service. The results are not identical. It's getting massaged in several different ways before it's presented to the user, but it's so clean. It is so good, so accurate. Google looks dated. They very much look dated now when you compare it to something as clean and modern as Search GTP. That's the first step. Let's get it worked out, and then they'll figure out what to do with it after that. I hope they move it to their own, to a new domain, but it's pretty expensive to do that AI searching, compute-wise, very
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah, because it's funny. I was looking at Notebook LM that Google have come out with, right? And for me, it's scary. I took one of my old episodes and I put it into sort of Notebook LM, and it gives you like a 6 or 7 minute synopsis of an actual episode. I'll probably do the same with this episode, right? You put it in and you end up with one man, one woman talking about the topics that are discussed in that particular episode.
Right.
And it is flawlessly good, right? It's so amazingly good. And I'm thinking you could probably create a very good faceless YouTube channel. You could probably create a very good, just by repurposing other people's content, right? You don't even need to be your own episodes. You can go and grab an episode of somebody else's podcast, put it in there and basically turn it
Oh,
into a
yeah.
6 minute, 7 minute episode that's a much shorter version of the kind of longer version.
Right.
Again, I think the thing I like doing the kind of the conversations like we're having now, which could go however long it goes, right? But then from there, people have a fairly low attention span. They may want to have bite-sized pieces, which is why I decided I wanted to make sure I took everything and put it into Twitter. I wanted to put it on X. I'll never call it X. I'll always call it Twitter. Put it into Twitter, put it into like Instagram, put it into Facebook, put it into TikTok, YouTube
Yep.
Shorts, right? So many different places in which you can repurpose the content, right? And pull out the salient sound bites, right? Because ultimately that's what it is. It's a conversation with some sound bites in it that's wrapped up in just all the other stuff that goes with it. And I think having the ability, I think that's where GPT is really good. It can look at it, it can look at sentiment, pull out the sentiment of it, and just go from there, really.
Mhm. Yeah, I just relaunched Search Engine World last week, covering news and tips and tricks and stuff. I'm taking all the articles and feeding them into Notebook LM and make a podcast out of this article and then tag it onto the bottom end of it. This whole idea of rich media is just, it's exploding right now. And the fun thing to do is take Notebook LM podcast and then feed it into something like Synthesia that creates avatars. And now you can actually film yourself and create an avatar of yourself that is very photorealistic, and then feed Notebook LM in it, and it'll sit there and put your face up there. We could be avatar. They don't know we're avatars, Jim. Imagine that. People watching this right now, we're the
Well, I
avatars.
was going to say, if it's good enough for ABBA and if it's good enough for Kiss to store their younger selves in perpetuity, right, for people to enjoy
Right.
long after they're gone, who are we to argue with that? So,
Right, right, right. Yeah, I've seen avatars pop up on TikTok already, avatar podcasts.
Yeah.
So it's going that route real quick.
yeah, I think for me, there's only one challenge in all of this, right? It's the accuracy of what's being said. Because, so like you and I, we're not avatars yet. If we were avatars, we'd have probably made much better looking versions of the two of them. I'd have had no black eyes and everything else. But I think from the point of view of if the information that is being given out is inaccurate, then that can potentially be really dangerous. This is one of the things I've been hugely critical of YouTube. Again, I want to become a big YouTuber, right? But I want to do it the hard way rather than the easy way, right? There's so many people that are posting stuff. Hey, I'm a millionaire at 14. I'm like, where's the proof? Show me that, right?
Right.
There's so much of it is, there's so much being said that is unverified, right? With screenshots that are unverified, with thumbnails that have got
Mhm.
just bogus information in them, right? And I'm thinking, who in YouTube is actually there sanitizing any of this stuff? There's all sorts of
Right.
different channels out there that exist to call out fake people, right? And they're calling out saying this person's a fake, and here's why they're a fake, and they make
Yep.
like long, almost like TV style video where they're talking about it's all investigative journalism type stuff, right? Which calls out why people are the shams that they are, right? And I think for that reason, I've been so frightened to say some of the things that I know to be true because people may go, that's not right. Because I think when you look at paid search, there's so many different ways you can arrive at ultimately maybe the same outcome, right? Because I've always said my job is to hold Google, Facebook, and people like that to account for what they're recommending as being best practice for advertisers. If you're going to have one set of
Right.
standards that all advertisers of all sizes in all disciplines, selling all things and whatever else, can all kind of abide by the same standards, right? They've got to have different kind of nuances within each vertical as to why something would work in e-commerce that may not work in insurance or something like that.
Totally agree. Yep. We have to always filter this information coming out of these social media outlets. Last week, I got into kind of a discussion with my wife, who is a university professor, about nursing and some of the information that is out there on TikTok. She showed me a study by another university claiming this was all fake and bad information. I go, nobody's listening to that. From my point of view, I scroll right by that stuff. But she said, what's out there, though? You got to have talks about what's available and what's going
Yeah.
on. It's hard to filter it. It really
Yeah.
is.
And it's at the moment, there's all this sort of the election cycle. We've just gone through one here in the UK. You've got to go through one in the States. There's all this kind of, again, the way in which the candidates are like courting the press and everything else. And it's just, again, I look at it as a external sort of like European looking at a separate thing in America. I'm thinking, how can you possibly decide between either of these candidates? They just seem to be broken in so many different ways, right? And we had the same thing. We had an election here quite recently, and there was misinformation put out about some kids that were killed. So there was riots, and we've ended up like with 1,000 people ending up going to prison, right? For basically trying to get these people who've come in illegally, or not illegally, they've come in on boats across the channel. They're housed in hotels until such time as they can process their asylum application, right? So there's a whole bunch of
Right.
stuff that kind of is wrong about that, right? But somebody said the person that killed these 3 young girls was one of these people that just come in on the boat. So all these people were going to hotels to basically knock down the doors to pull people out and I guess lynch them in the street. And you're thinking, and that was completely bogus. That was not what had actually happened. The person who was responsible for doing it had been here legally for quite a number of years and everything. He's only an 18-year-old kid, right? So you look at it and you think, if people are able to light the touch paper and ignite such hatred for other people, other human beings, these people that were coming on the boats were barricading the doors of the hotel because people were there, not with pickaxes, but they were trying to break the doors down, throwing things through the window, right? And you think it cost us probably tens of millions of pounds to repair the hotels and all that sort of stuff, right? And yeah, and all because of misinformation. And I think that there's
Yeah.
just people just need to be so careful about the way in which they get their information and kind of have the ability to do a bit of fact checking if they're able to.
Yeah. I don't take anybody who posts something, somebody died. I go and look it up on Google. Did this person actually die? You got to make sure because there's so much fake news
Yeah.
out there about that.
Yeah. Quite scary. So you mentioned there that you just relaunched your publication. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. It's the original site that I made back in the day. It was my first big site, search engine world. And it just seems like the right time to do it right now. All these changes going on from AI to search to all the changes the search engines themselves are making. It just seemed like the right time. And I didn't want to use anybody else's platform. I wanted to be able to give a platform for ours, for our industry to talk. And so, yeah, I jumped back into it. So far, just great response from the community. Thank you very much for everybody who's visited it and come see us at Search Engine World.
I used to love Search Engine World. Again, I was not prolific. I was nowhere near as prolific on Webmaster World, but I used to enjoy posting stuff on there, try and break certain things whenever I got told stuff by Google about what was going on with Google AdWords at the time. I would go on to Webmaster World and post about it.
Right.
And yeah, really kind of quite, for me, it was a good source of information, but also a good
Hmm.
source of friendship, right? There was a lot of good friends I could build up
Right.
on the back of that.
Right.
And again, I used to enjoy
Right.
Search Engine World back in the day. Was sorry to see it go in the same way. I was a bit sorry to see Webmaster World go to I Am Ninjas. I know that you bought it back recently. Is that right? Was that what?
Say that again?
Did you buy Webmaster World back or?
Oh yeah, from Jim
Yeah.
Boykin. Yeah, that was 5
Right.
years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I sold it to him in 2012 and bought it back in 2018, 19, 18, 18. So
And
6 years
Webmaster
ago.
World still
So,
exists now?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep, we're just cranking
I'm
away,
just calling myself out for not going there very often.
Compost, Jim, compost.
I will do for sure. That'll be my action point after this conversation. So yeah, so obviously, so that in terms of search engine world, what are you hoping to have on there moving forward now that you're resurrecting it?
We're going to cover the bigger hard news and a bunch of the Google updates, lots of tips and tricks, but it's always going to be from the mindset of a SEO, by SEOs for SEOs. I'm saying, I just realized how much information out there that we read about search engines is from the search engines. It's all filtered through the search engine by their reps. So we're definitely going to come from our point of view, Jim, not Google's point of view. And I think it's sorely needed in our industry right now. So that was a big impetus to start it back up.
Do you see again? I think when you look at the kind of the ecosystem that a lot of the kind of the conferences in search have got, they have the conference, they have the training workshops, which obviously you have. They've got the publication that kind of gives them the ability to put industry content out there, which I guess it's at the point in time when you are ready to launch your next event, it gives you a good platform to get people, maybe a whole
Right.
hour speakers on to write posts or create. Again, I don't know if you're planning on creating video content on there or what have you. I think a lot of people, yes, they like the kind of the written word, but I think a lot of people are now consuming more of their content on social media platforms and so on. So I
Yep.
think what I've been blown away, right, by the number of people, because I think the first couple of TikToks I posted were like, I think I just posted it just to see what it was like. Then I did some others where I'd been out in the sun, I had sunburn on my face was all ruddy and horrible. But I've had so many people that came up to me at Pubcon and said they love my TikToks and everything. I'm like, again, I'm not doing it for anything other than just to try and help educate myself, but also to help provide some entertainment for the people that kind of watch them, if they're not necessarily going to go and watch the kind of watch or listen to the full episode of the podcast.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. Having a content play is a great platform, great outlet for the speakers to talk. Yeah, we're going to tap into some of that. It's a good synergy between a conference and a publication, self-referential, and you got to have something to do in the downtime too.
Yeah.
So it's
Because
going to work
I
good,
guess I guess putting on a show it's full on for a period of time, and then there's like a little bit of a trough. It tends you
Yeah.
prefer it not to be. So
You got processes in place too. There's stuff to do in the off season. Like most of the work for a conference is done 3 to 6 months out early. Everything in that last 3 months is supporting the attendees, lots of support emails.
yeah. Well, Brett, this has been
So that's where we
fantastic
are.
to have you on. I know that,
Sure.
that I spoke to you a little while before, like the last PubCon was about to take place, and I know that now that obviously it was done and dusted, that now would be a good time to have you on. I'm like, obviously, I was delighted to come out and see you again in person, and also present at the show. And yeah, I'll obviously leave links to all of what's been discussed on the episode today. So the PubCon search engine watch, Webmaster World. Is there anything else? You haven't written any books or anything? Because most of the people I speak to, they've written books at some point in time.
Not yet. Not yet. I've been working on
I've,
one, but nothing ready yet. So
I have enough trouble reading a book. It just, I don't have the attention span to read a book. So I can't even imagine I'd have the attention span to write one. Maybe get a ghostwriter.
right. So
But yeah, it's been
no, it's been a pleasure,
nice
Jim.
to have
It
you
always
on.
is.
And yeah, so obviously all of Brett's contact details, you know, I know that there'll be a future PubCon where people can pitch to present. If you don't know PubCon, definitely get to the PubCon website. On social media, there'll also be the sort of Facebook and so on. So yeah, just Brett has been instrumental in terms of my career, and I'm sure that he'll be instrumental in your career if you give him the opportunity to do so.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Brett.
Thank you. Been a pleasure.